The mission was falling apart. Radios filled with static. Orders overlapped, lost in the noise. The storm hit faster than planned, turning the valley into a trap. Crews scrambled for answers that would not come. At the edge of the room, a woman no one noticed studied the map. She saw the mistake, saw the one path left. No one asked her. No one expected her. But she stepped forward, spoke once, and guided them through. The room fell silent, not in shock, but in the quiet weight of what had been done. She had seen what they missed. Dawn broke slowly over the forward base, casting long, pale bands of light across the dust-choked ground. The storm front loomed on the horizon, its edge a dark smear against the rising sun, the kind of weather that promised trouble before the first drop of rain ever fell. The base was already awake. The hum of activity building as the day began. Jet crews moved with quick confidence, checking instruments, topping off fuel, and calling out orders that echoed off hangar walls. Engines coughed into life one by one, their rumble deepening as power built. The air smelled of fuel and metal, of dust stirred by boots and tires. A breeze tugged at loose tarps and carried the first bite of moisture from the coming storm. Near the far edge of the flight line, where the noise thinned and the dust hung heavier, an old Huey sat alone. The helicopter's paint had faded to a dull olive that bore no shine. The frame showed the marks of long service, patches of chipped paint exposing silver beneath. Panels held firm with well-worn rivets. The rotors, still at rest, creaked softly as the breeze nudged them. Metal fittings glinted in the rising light, dull compared to the polished bodies of the jets, lined up closer to the hangars. The Huey was a machine out of time, a leftover among newer, faster aircraft. Most on the base gave it little thought beyond the supply lists it helped move. Claire stood beside the Huey, clipboard in hand, pencil tucked behind one ear. Her long, blonde hair was tied back loosely, a few strands catching the light as they shifted in the morning wind. She wore a plain tan flight jacket with dark tactical pants. Her boots scuffed from work, her shoulders squared but unassuming. No rank marked her uniform. No insignia caught the eye. Only a pair of shoulder patches faded from the sun. She moved without hurry, checking the aircraft with practiced care. Fingers tracing seams, eyes narrowing slightly at each point of wear. The helicopter's age did not bother her. She knew its voice, the way metal spoke of strain or strength, the slight groan of a panel that needed tightening, the reassuring weight of a rotor balanced just so. Around her, the confident voices of the jet crews carried. Someone joked about beating the storm to target and back. Another laughed, promising a round of drinks for the first to make it home dry. The noise rose and fell, full of the energy of those who believed the day ahead was already theirs. Claire listened without reacting, the chatter part of the background like the hum of engines or the snap of flags in the wind. Her focus stayed on the work, on the familiar, steady rhythm of inspection that no one saw but mattered all the same. She paused by the nose of the Huey, shading her eyes as she looked toward the storm front. The line of clouds had thickened since first light, their shape uneven, the lower edges ragged where wind carved through. The breeze smelled sharper now, the kind of air that warned of rain before it came. Claire noted how the clouds shifted at the valley's edge, the dip in terrain shaping the flow of wind in ways that could trap or twist anything that flew too close. It was the kind of detail missed in briefings, lost in satellite maps or bold lines drawn on planning charts. But she saw it. The small changes in the sky that meant the storm would move faster than expected. The valley's draft turning narrow gaps into dangerous funnels. The Huey creaked again as she circled it, the sound of age rather than weakness. Claire ran her hand along the tail boom, feeling the slight warmth where the sun reached the metal. The clipboard hung at her side, checklist complete. but she stayed a moment longer, watching the storm's edge, measuring its pace in the way the air cooled, the way light dimmed at its front. The jets further down the line were nearly ready, their crews climbing aboard, helmets sealed, visors down, confident in the machines they flew. One of the younger ground crew passed near Claire, glancing at the Huey with a grin. "That old thing still flying," he called out, not unkind, but with the casual dismissal of youth. Claire returned the glance but said nothing, her calm unbroken. She stepped back, giving the Huey one last look, the weight of experience behind her gaze. The storm would come, and when it did, the real test would not be in speed or firepower, but in knowing how to listen to the sky, how to move with it rather than against it. The base roared to life as the first jet engine spooled to full power, the sound deep and steady, full of promise. Dust lifted in spirals along the flight line, banners of earth against the hard light. Claire turned, notebook tucked under her arm, and made her way toward the operations tent, boots crunching in the gravel. Around her, the noise rose, the storm in the sky answered by the storm of preparation on the ground. But beneath it all, there was still the quiet, the steady readiness of the woman and the machine no one noticed, waiting at the edge for the moment that would come. The command tent buzzed with energy as the sun climbed higher, its warmth turning the air inside heavy and close. Maps were spread across tables, corners weighted down with mugs and spare batteries. The glow of monitors cast pale light on faces bent in concentration or lifted in easy confidence. The smell of strong coffee mixed with dust and the faint tang of oil carried on the breeze from the flight line. Radios crackled with bursts of static as operators checked frequencies, their voices low but sure. The jet crews moved between stations, helmets tucked under arms, sharing last-minute checks and easy banter that masked the tension beneath. Claire stood near the rear of the tent, notebook in hand, pencil resting lightly between her fingers. She watched the flow of planning, the points marked on maps, the paths traced with quick fingers across topography she already knew by heart. Her long blonde hair was pulled back, but loose strands framed her face, catching the warm light that slipped between the canvas walls. She shifted her weight, waiting for the right moment to speak, to offer what she had seen in the storm's approach, and the valley's wind patterns that could turn a safe route into a trap. A pause opened in the briefing as one officer adjusted a monitor and another reached for his coffee. Claire cleared her throat gently, voice measured but clear. "Sir, I believe the storm's path is tightening faster than expected. The valley winds could complicate exit routes." Her words were calm, precise, shaped by experience rather than doubt. For a brief second, the nearest officer glanced her way. It was a senior pilot, his uniform sharp, his eyes on the screen rather than her face. "That is noted," he said with a tone that carried finality more than interest. "We will adjust as needed." His hand waved slightly, not unkind, but closing the moment. Focus shifted back to the maps. The storm reduced to a line on paper rather than the force Claire had read in the sky. The hum of conversation resumed, voices rising with easy certainty. Someone near the front chuckled, glancing over a shoulder. "The Huey Museum tour guide speaks," he said, earning soft laughter from those close enough to hear. Another voice, younger, added without malice but with the carelessness of confidence. "Maybe she is worried her old bird will get wet." The group around him laughed, the sound blending with the radio's hiss and the low roar of a jet engine turning over outside. Claire's pencil tapped once against her notebook before she stilled her hand. Her face remained composed, eyes steady on the map she could see from where she stood. A burst of digital shutter broke the air as a junior crewman snapped a photo through the open tent flap. The image caught Claire near her Huey, its faded frame visible behind her. Within seconds, the photo found its way to a handheld screen, a caption added with quick thumbs. "Cargo Queen on standby." The screen was tilted to share the image, Smirks traded like currency. Claire's gaze flicked once toward the movement, then back to her notes. The quiet dignity of her posture remained unbroken. The weight of the moment settled not in her stance but in the calm with which she turned and stepped back toward the tent's edge, ready to continue the work others dismissed. The tent grew warmer as the morning deepened. The canvas walls trapped the heat. The scent of coffee now mingled with sweat and the metallic bite of equipment running hot. Laughter faded into focused discussion as flight times were confirmed. Weapons systems double-checked and the chatter of confident preparation filled the space. Claire moved through it as she always did, unseen except when a joke was needed, unheard except by the storm she watched with practiced eyes. Outside, the Huey waited as it always did, its frame patient beneath the rising sun. The checklist in Claire's hand bore no marks of pride, only the steady notations of work done well. The machine was old, but its voice was clear to her, its purpose as true as ever. The photo, shared in jest, carried no weight against the truth she knew. The storm would come. The valley would test them. And when it did, the quiet strength they overlooked might be the only one that mattered but Charles. Claire breathed in the warm air thick with noise and turned back to her task, steady, prepared, and as invisible as the wind that would shape the day. Midday brought no relief from the weight of the storm as it crept closer, its dark front stretching across the horizon like a warning unheeded. The heat of the morning had given way to a restless wind, carrying the first sharp scent of rain, the kind that clung to dust and made the air heavy. At the flight line, the jets lifted off one by one, their engines roaring defiance at the sky. The ground trembled with each launch, and the sound chased the quiet from the base as surely as the storm chased the light from the valley. Claire stood at the edge of the airfield, notebook still in hand, watching as the sleek aircraft vanished into the darkening sky. Her eyes stayed steady on the shapes of the clouds, on the ragged edge where the wind funneled through the valley below. She saw what others dismissed, the patterns that spoke of the storm's speed, of how the valley would twist and trap anything that dared its narrow turns in that weather. Inside the command post, the mood shifted as the first reports came through. What had started as confident chatter gave way to clipped updates, voices tight with focus. Radio operators leaned in over their equipment, fingers adjusting dials as static rose and fell. The storm met the squadron faster than expected, its winds stronger, its walls higher. Through the rising crackle of interference came the first signs of trouble, a call for bearing adjustment, a request for altitude confirmation. Then the voice of a pilot, calm but strained, reporting damage, a flameout, loss of power, dropping fast. The coordinates came through in bursts, swallowed by static, but clear enough. The decision was swift. The pilot ejected, trusting the training drilled into him, trusting that rescue would come. Claire closed her eyes for a moment, the image vivid in her mind, the canopy blown, the rush of air, the white bloom of the chute beneath the storm's shadow, a figure drifting toward rock and brush and the unknown. When she opened them, the storm seemed closer, the valley darker. The jets circled, but the storm's grip was too tight, the valley too narrow. Their speed worked against them now, their systems unable to see through the storm's heart. The storm had claimed the downed pilot, and the base felt the weight of that truth as the minutes passed. The command post became a blur of movement, orders layered over questions, solutions proposed and abandoned as fast as they formed. A helicopter team prepped to launch, but the wind tore at the first liftoff attempt, forcing them down. The valley's twists and the storm's force defeated machine after machine, plan after plan. Radios crackled with failed connections, lost signals, the storm's voice louder than the men who tried to command it. The pilot's beacon was faint now, hidden beneath layers of static and rain, a whisper beneath the storm's roar. Claire stood unnoticed near the map table, her hand resting on the edge of the chart. The lines drawn at the morning briefing had meant little then, just routes on paper. Now, they meant everything. She traced the valley's path with her eyes, knowing its shape beyond the ink, knowing it through years of study, of listening to the land as much as to the machine she flew. The Huey sat where it always had, forgotten at the edge of the flight line, its skin dull, its frame heavy with age. But it was ready. She had made sure of that in the quiet hours when no one watched, when the storm was still a distant threat. Outside, the storm pressed harder against the base. Rain began to fall in earnest, drumming against metal and canvas alike. The wind carried dust and grit before it, stinging the skin of those who stepped beyond shelter. The air smelled of wet earth, of ozone, sharp in the breeze. Lightning flickered at the edge of vision, silent for now, but promising worse. Inside, voices rose in frustration. No one volunteered. No one stepped forward. The strength of the morning's confidence had drained away, leaving hesitation where boldness had stood. The tools they trusted most failed them when the storm closed its fist around the valley. Claire drew a slow breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. No one called her name. No one asked for the Huey. But she saw what they did not. The narrow window the valley offered, the path that required instinct more than speed, understanding more than power. The storm could be crossed. The pilot could be reached. But it would take a machine dismissed as too old and a pilot dismissed as invisible. She turned from the table, stepping into the thickening air, her decision made without need for words. The storm's noise grew as she walked toward the Huey, the rain now steady, the wind at her back. The helicopter waited, its presence solid and sure against the shifting sky. Claire climbed aboard, hands steady on controls worn smooth with time, her movements practiced, confident. The radio hissed in the background, voices still calling for plans, for solutions that would not come. She spoke only when she was ready, voice clear, calm, cutting through the static as she declared her intent. The base fell quiet, listening, as the sound of the Huey's rotors rose to meet the storm. Claire lifted into the wind, into the rain, into the valley's waiting mouth, the quiet answer to the storm's challenge. The storm met Claire head-on the moment the Huey lifted from the flight line. The helicopter's frame groaned as the wind shoved against it, testing every bolt, every seam, every hour of work that had kept it flying this long. The rotors bit the air, steady and true despite the weight of rain and the pull of the storm's current. The base fell behind, swallowed by the curtain of falling water and rising dust, its noise replaced by the roar of wind and the drum of rain on metal skin. Claire kept her hands firm on the controls, feeling every shift of weight, every tremor of the air beneath her. The Huey responded as it always had, a machine of purpose shaped by time and care, ready to meet the storm as she was. Her eyes scanned the terrain ahead, or what she could see of it between bursts of lightning that lit the valley below in stark, jagged relief. The rain lashed the windows, streaks of water running like veins across the glass, blurring the line between sky and stone. The valley walls rose around her, dark shapes in the storm's grip, their edges sharp where the lightning found them, their depths hidden in shadow and rain. The wind howled through the gaps, pushing and pulling, trying to turn her aside. But the Huey held its path, guided by Claire's steady hands, by instinct honed through hours of study and flight where no one watched. The radio hissed in the background, the storm's voice louder than the bass that called through it. Claire's voice, when it came, was calm, measured, cutting through the static with simple updates. Position marked. Valley entered. Beacon signal, faint but present. The bass answered, voices tight with tension but silent otherwise, listening to the pilot they had not seen until now. The Huey's instruments flickered as the storm pressed closer. But Claire trusted the machine's feel more than the needles and lights. She read the wind in the pressure on the stick, in the weight of the pedals beneath her boots, in the pitch of the rotor's song against the rain. The valley narrowed. The storm funneled through like water in a canyon. Stronger, faster, louder. The Huey rocked but did not falter, riding the current where others would have fought it. Claire's gaze swept the walls, the ground below, the dark shapes where rock met scrub, looking for the sign that would mean the downed pilot was near. A flash of lightning revealed the floor of the valley in stark white for a heartbeat, showing debris, broken branches, and the ghost of a figure huddled against a rise. The beacon's pulse grew stronger in her ear, matched to the faint glint of metal at the man's side. She marked the place in her mind, hands easing the Huey lower, the machine answering with trust built over years. The wind tore at the Huey as it descended, but Claire moved with it, not against. The rain thickened, blinding in bursts, then cleared in patches as the storm shifted above. The skids touched rock, uneven but sure, the frame settling with a shudder that spoke of strain, but not surrender. Claire kept one hand on the controls, the other reaching for the radio. "Down at beacon site," she said, voice level, "preparing extraction." The base acknowledged, their voices soft, as if unwilling to break the spell of what they heard. Through the rain, the pilot came, dragging one leg, hand raised in signal. Claire watched him approach, eyes sweeping the valley for threat, for movement that did not belong. The storm shielded as much as it threatened, hiding them from eyes that might seek them, masking the sound of the Huey's arrival. The pilot reached the door, climbed aboard with effort, his breath loud in the tight space. Claire checked him once, quick hands on shoulder and arm, then lifted the Huey from the valley floor before the storm could pin them there. The climb was harder, the wind angrier now that they defied it. The Huey bucked but held, Claire's hands firm, her focus absolute. The valley fell away below, the storm's heart around them, lightning chasing their path in flickers and roar. The radio crackled, the bass calling, hope edging their words. Claire answered with position and progress, her voice the calm at the storm's center. The Huey climbed, broke the valley's grasp, turned for home through wind and rain and the storm's last fury. The base appeared through the curtain of weather as the rain began to ease, lights blurred but steady. The Huey crossed the last stretch of storm-racked sky, its engine's song weary but unbroken. Claire guided it down with care, the skids touching ground as the wind fell away at last. The base waited, silent, as the rotors slowed, as the rain gave way to mist. The Huey had come through. The storm answered not by words or plans, but by the steady hands of the pilot no one had seen until she rose alone. The valley floor opened beneath the storm's weight, a narrow stretch of rock and scrub framed by jagged walls that funneled the wind into a howl that shook the Huey as it descended. Rain hammered the metal skin, streaking the windows, blurring the shapes of stone and shadow below. Claire guided the Huey down with care, her hands steady on the controls, her eyes locked on the small clearing where rock flattened just enough to take the skids. The frame groaned as the helicopter settled onto the uneven surface, the storm's force trying to shove it aside. The skids scraped rock, settled, held. Claire's breath slowed as the machine came to rest, blades still fighting the wind that tore at them. Outside, the rain stung like grit, driven sideways by gusts that seemed determined to blind and deafen all at once. The valley's walls echoed the storm's voice, a deep roar beneath the higher whine of the wind. Lightning flickered beyond the peaks, brief glimpses of the storm's heart that showed the ground in stark relief, every crack and boulder thrown into harsh light before darkness returned. The air smelled of wet stone, of earth churned to mud, of the storm's fury made real. Claire scanned the ground ahead, searching the haze for the shape she knew must be there. Then she saw him, a figure moving through the mist, one arm raised in signal, the other bracing against the slope. The downed pilot limped toward the Huey, his flight suit torn at the knee, blood mixing with the rain as it ran down his leg. His face was pale, set in a mask of pain and determination. Claire kept one hand on the controls, the other ready at the door, watching as he closed the distance. The Huey rocked beneath the wind, but held its ground as if knowing this was its purpose at last. The pilot reached the door, gripping the frame with fingers white from strain. Claire leaned out, caught his arm, pulled him aboard with a strength that came from focus rather than force. He collapsed into the seat, breath harsh in the small space. Claire checked his injury with a quick glance, saw the bleeding was steady, but not life-threatening. She gave a short nod to herself, sealed the door, and returned both hands to the controls. The Huey rose from the valley floor with a shudder, blades biting the air with renewed purpose. Enemy fire cracked through the storm's voice, sharp reports that echoed off the walls. Muzzle flashes flared in the distance, small bursts of light that betrayed their position. Claire felt the rounds ping against the Huey's side, metal striking metal, the sound sharp but not yet dangerous. She adjusted course, using the valley's bends to shield their flight, weaving between outcrops and ridges, keeping low where the storm's cover was thickest. The rain masked their sound, the storm's fury, their cloak as much as their enemy. The radio came to life, voices from the base calling for status, for position, for hope. Claire answered in calm, clear tones, reporting their lift, their heading, the condition of the rescued pilot. Her words cut through the static, steady and sure, the sound of quiet resolve in a sea of tension. The base fell silent beyond their replies, listening, as if afraid to break the thread of courage that tied them to the storm's heart. The Huey climbed, the storm fighting every foot of gain. But Claire worked with it, not against. She read the wind in the tilt of the machine, in the push of the pedals, in the strain of the stick beneath her hand. The pilot beside her said nothing, trusted in the hands that flew where no one else dared. The valley fell behind, its traps and threats left to the storm that guarded it. The peaks slipped past beneath the Huey's shadow, the storm easing as they cleared the worst of its grip. Rain softened to a steady patter. The wind fell to a heavy breath rather than a roar. The lights of the base glowed faint through the mist, a promise of safety just ahead. Claire guided the Huey home with the same care she had guided it through the storm, each movement precise, each decision measured. The rotors slowed as they settled on the pad, the skids kissing the ground with the gentleness of a pilot who knew both the machine and the storm's cost. The rescued pilot turned to her as the engines wound down, eyes meeting hers in silent thanks. No words passed between them. None were needed. The Huey stood as shelter and salvation, its scars a record of what had been done. Claire shut down the systems, removed her headset, and stepped onto the pad as the storm gave way to the coming night. The base watched, the storm's roar replaced by the quiet truth of what had been done. The hands that had reached where others hesitated had brought him home. The hero they had overlooked was the one who answered when the storm called. The storm gave its last breath as the Huey crossed the edge of the valley and made its slow, steady way home. The rain had eased to a mist that clung to the ground and softened the shapes of hangars and tents in the fading light. The wind, once a roar, now stirred only the loose canvas at the edges of the landing pad. The Huey came into view, battered by the storm but flying true, its rotors carrying the weight of the journey and the quiet promise of return. The machine's scars caught the glow of the setting sun, each streak and dent a mark of where it had gone and what it had brought back. At the base, the noise that had filled the day fell away as those gathered turned their eyes to the sky. The crews stood shoulder to shoulder, their chatter silenced, their faces marked by the strain of waiting. The command staff, The same voices that had once filled the air with confident orders and easy jokes now stood still, the weight of what they had not done heavy in their stance. They watched as the Huey approached, its shadow stretching across the pad, the storm's last winds parting before it. The dust rose as the skids met the ground, a soft cloud that blurred the line between earth and air for a moment, before settling at their feet. The rotors slowed, their beat fading into the hush that followed. Claire powered down the systems with the same care she had shown in the storm, each motion precise, each decision quiet and sure. She removed her headset, set it aside, and opened the door. The rescued pilot stepped down first, his uniform streaked with mud, his face drawn with fatigue and relief. He turned, straightened as best he could, and brought his hand up in salute. No words passed between them. None were needed. His gesture carried the weight of all that had happened, of what she had done. The base watched, the moment framed by the soft light of dusk, the storm's edge retreating into memory. The flight lead, the one who had dismissed her words, who had joked at her expense, stepped forward at last. His boots stirred the dust as he crossed the pad, his hand extended, his gaze steady. Claire met his eyes, took his hand, and gave it a firm shake. Her expression composed, her voice quiet when she spoke. Just doing my part. No boast, no demand for praise, only the truth of a duty met with all she had to give. The others followed, some offering hands, some simply nodding. Respect found in the silence where once there had been laughter. The base settled as night drew closer, the storm's noise replaced by the soft hum of generators, the quiet voices of crews securing equipment, the low murmur of those who spoke of what they had seen. The Huey stood at the edge of the pad, its frame touched by the last gold of the sun, no longer forgotten, no longer a relic to mock. It had proven its worth in the storm, as had the pilot who flew it. The machine and the woman had done what no one else had dared, and the base carried that knowledge now. Unspoken, but clear. Claire walked to the operations tent, boots leaving faint prints in the damp earth. She entered without fanfare, without pause for recognition. The flight log lay open on the table where she had left it that morning, the pages waiting for the record of what had passed. She picked up the pen, its weight familiar in her hand, and wrote with steady script. The details of the mission filled the lines: position, time, conditions, the facts as they were, free of embellishment. She logged the storm's strength, the route flown, the rescue completed, her name at the end. No flourish, no title, just the truth of what had been done. The tent's walls glowed faint in the dusk, the light soft against the worn pages of the log. Claire set the pen down, closed the book with care, and stepped outside once more. The base lay quiet beneath the first stars, the air fresh with the scent of rain-washed earth. The Huey waited in the last of the light, a machine of purpose, its work done for now. Claire stood for a moment, hands at her sides, gaze on the horizon where the storm had gone. The respect she had earned was not in the words of others, not in their applause or their regret, but in the knowledge that when the storm called, she had answered. That was enough. The night deepened, the base at peace, and the quiet hero stepped into the dark, the storm's voice now only memory. Claire's journey was never about glory or loud recognition. She stood at the edge, quiet and overlooked, steady in her purpose while others underestimated her. When the storm rose and confidence faltered, it was her unseen strength that carried the mission through. With calm precision, she flew where no one else dared, guided not by pride but by duty. The respect she earned came not from what she demanded, but from what she did when it mattered most. This is a reminder that true courage often lives in those we fail to see, and that self-worth is not given, but proven through action. Take a moment to reflect on the quiet strengths in your own life or in those around you. Share your thoughts in the comments and follow for more stories where resilience shines. Even in the face of doubt, the storm may pass, but the memory of courage remains.